Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm really excited because I'm going to be filming, editing, and uploading this video to get it up for you guys. I picked up the new Natasha Denona Glam face palettes. I did pick both shades up, so light and dark. So we're gonna do swatches, a tutorial, demo, and I wanna tell you my initial impression on these palettes in case you were interested in grabbing them. Now these are available at Sephora, and I know we just started the VIB sale. So if you are a Rouge right now, you get 20% off, and then of course the VIB gets 15% off in a few days, and then the Insider gets 10% off. But the sale is on until November 15th. These do keep going in and out of stock on Sephora. I will keep you guys updated on my community tab and Instagram, but I can't say whether it's going to be in stock when I post this video because last night it was in stock, this morning it's not, but honestly, I could see it going back in stock by the time I get this video up. So I'll keep you guys updated. These are also available at Beautylish, which I will link down below, and then also Cult Beauty. So I'll leave all the links down below in case you don't want to wait for the sale, or maybe you're not a Sephora shopper and you just want to get your hands on these palettes. I did not do my foundation because, spoiler alert, I actually used these yesterday, just playing around with them. I started filming and then I got sidetracked and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do it tomorrow. There is fallout on the shimmer shade specifically, which we'll talk about when we get there, but I thought today I would just start out with no foundation so I can really get a nice clean look. So if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe. If you enjoy these first impression videos on new products, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps my channel out. And without further ado, let's get into it. So as I said before, I did pick up both colors in the new Natasha Denona Glam Face and Eye palette. So Natasha's Glam palette was one of her most successful palettes, so she decided to come out with a similar version, but face palettes, and she did a light colorway and a dark colorway. It says the light is for light to medium skin tones and the dark is for medium to dark skin tones. I know a lot of you are on the fence, even me looking at them, I'm like, okay, I could really kind of go either way depending on the highlight in the dark palette. So I want to do a tutorial using the light on one side and the dark on the other. That way you guys can see how the colors show up on my skin tone. Now, of course, I'm super fair. Naturally, I stay out of the sun, but I do use self tanner. So I would say that I'm a light medium with my self tanner on. Without my self tanner, I am definitely fair, but I usually have self tanner on just because I feel like I look so washed out with my light hair, brows, lashes, and skin. Everything's just very fair. These retail for $59 each, and they are limited edition. That's one thing I wanted to note. They are made in Italy. They have an 18-month shelf life, and in each palette, you get a cream blush, a powder highlighter, and 5 different eyeshadows. Now, in terms of the packaging, the boxes the palettes come in are this high shine metallic. The light one has more of a silver box, and the dark one has more of a bronzy tone. And these do correspond with the actual palettes. They're very shiny and metallic. I have to say the packaging on these palettes, she knocked it out of the park, and I'm gonna show you in a minute, but they're gorgeous. Starting out with the light palette, you can see it's this beautiful silverish taupey color. It has an ND logo that's raised right here, and then the Glam Face palette is engraved in the palette. It also has these rounded edges, and it's very thin. It almost reminds me of like a brand new iPhone or something like that. Just very thin and sleek. I think she knocked it out of the park with the packaging on this. And then the packaging on the dark palette is exactly the same, except for it's a bronzy shade. So you can definitely tell which one you're grabbing into. The only thing I will say is fingerprints will get on this, but it is beautiful to look at. So here is the inside of the light palette. You can see you have the flap here, which is going to protect the cream blush. Because of the flap, I was wondering if the highlighter was cream, but it's not. It's a powder, and it does say in her description that it has a brand new formula for the highlighter that uses Japanese technology to deliver an extreme glow. Then you've got your 3 mattes, and I believe that these shimmers are called her crystal sparkles, I want to say. I'm a little bit confused on that. I don't think these are new, but I don't know if I felt anything like this from Natasha. And then here is the inside of the dark palette. So of course you have deeper tones, but you've got 1 cream blush, a powder highlight, 3 mattes, and then 2 of the Crystal Sparkle shades. So now that we've gone over the information and swatches and close-ups, I want to start applying. So I'm going to be using the light palette on this side of my face and the dark palette on this side, just so we can see how the highlight and blush looks on my skin tone, as well as the shadows. I know the looks are not going to match, but I feel like I really want to showcase both palettes and see what I can come up with. Okay, so we're gonna start out with the light palette first. I'm gonna go into the shade Transition. Now she does have these labeled as like outer corner, inner corner, transition. I'm just gonna do whatever I wanna do, but you can use that as a guide if that helps you. So for this shade, I'm just going to blend it into the crease, basically as a transition. Now this shade is very light, but this is the light palette. And I did notice when I played around with these yesterday that the deeper palette or the dark palette is a little bit more warm toned overall on the eyeshadows than the light palette. Okay, jumping into the dark palette on this side, I'm gonna go into the shade Transition. Now, obviously this is very dark in terms of a transition for my skin tone, so I am going to use very, very, very light hand. And this is very pigmented, so I want to be very light with it just because this is not a typical transition I would use just because the shade is too dark for me, but obviously it's the dark palette, so if you have a, you know, medium tan, deep skin tone, it should work. So jumping back into the light palette, I'm going to go into the shade Crease, and I'm going to use a different brush. This is a Smith 230, and I want to use this in my actual crease. So right in here, lower than where I would put my transition. So this is doing a nice job at adding some depth to my crease. And then I'm just going back in with that first brush and just kind of going over the edges here. Back into the dark palette, going into the crease shade here. I went very lightly with this transition shade. When I used it yesterday, just playing around, it's really pigmented. So what you see here is very, very light just because it was a lot yesterday. So this crease shade is probably gonna look pretty intense right in the crease here. I just went very, very lightly with that transition because I feel like when I was playing with it yesterday, I went a little too heavy-handed. And then same thing, I'm just going to go over the edges with a clean, fluffy brush. Okay, so back into the light palette, I'm gonna go into the smoke shade, and I'm gonna use a small brush. This is a Rephr 13, and I'm gonna do a halo eye here. So what I wanna do is basically pack this really low on the inner and outer corner of my eye. So because this is the deepest shade in the palette, this is about as deep as you're gonna be able to get with the light palette. So just keep that in mind. Of course, you could always bring in any other deep matte that you have in your collection, but back into the dark palette, gonna do the same thing. Now this shade is really deep and beautiful for a halo eye. So this is the shade Smoke. It is like a rich, chocolatey brown. So you can see the depth difference on the light versus the dark palette. Okay, so going back into blend. Okay, so now on to the fun part. These shimmers in here are so beautiful, but they're messy. So I just wanna note that. So here's the 2 shades from the light palette. So what I'm gonna do is start out with the outer corner shade here, and I'm gonna use a wet brush. So I have the Rephr 28, and I did wet it slightly. And I'm going to apply this on the inner and outer corner where I put the deep matte shade, but look how beautiful this is. Like, it's like flakes, like gold flakes almost, but it is messy and I do get fallout even with wetting my brush. So I would definitely use a glitter glue or do your eyes first like I am. So I'm just going to apply this on either side here. I do feel like your finger is the most impactful. Yeah, like you can see. All right, so you can see the fallout even with using my finger or a wet brush. I'm gonna go in again to the light palette and use inner corner, and I'm gonna use this on my finger in the center of the lid. So I did spray my finger with some Urban Decay All Nighter. I mean, look how gorgeous that is. It's just flaky, so you have to expect fallout. So once I have that applied, I'm going back in with the smoke shade from the light palette, just making sure I don't lose my depth. And then I'm tapping on that inner corner just one more time. I mean, it's beautiful. It's just definitely a little messy, so just do your eyes first. Okay, so now back into the dark palette, I'm gonna go into the shade Outer Corner. Now this one, the shades are different. In the light palette, it is like a gold and then almost like a silver color. In this palette, it's sort of like a cranberry and then a taupey gunmetal. So we're gonna start out with the Outer Corner, which is more of that cranberry shade. I'm gonna try to use my finger dry here. There's like a dog party outside, so if you hear that. So they definitely apply the best with a finger. It's just hard if you want a kind of precise application. I'm gonna go in now to Inner Corner, which is this shade. That would be too deep for my inner corner personally. This shade is like a gorgeous taupey, silvery shade. So I'm just doing the same thing. Ooh, this is so beautiful. But you can see how different the palettes are in terms of the depth you're gonna get, because the shimmers in here obviously aren't as light. And I do feel, just from the formula, if you can notice, I feel like the dark palette, the shimmers are not as messy. And I don't know if it has to do with the colors. I definitely have fallout, but I feel like the dark palette, the shimmers in here almost behave like they are creamier and not as dry or flaky. Just even looking in my palette, if you look at my light palette, these are kind of flaky, just a lot of fallout going on. Same thing on my face. Whereas if you look in my dark palette, they really don't look like that. So I don't know if anybody else noticed that. It just seems like these are a little bit creamier in the dark palette. They adhere better, less fallout. They almost behave like you did wet your finger, even though I didn't. And then same thing going back in with that smoke shade on the dark palette to make sure I didn't lose any depth. And then just doing one final tap in the center of the Inner Corner shade. So I've noticed also with these shimmers, once you put them down, if you blend around them, they do sort of like fade a little bit and flake away. So I feel like you want to put them where you want them and then don't touch them, if that makes sense. Okay, so I put the rest of my makeup on and I want to jump back into the palettes, finish off the eyes, and then we'll move on to the face. So I'm going to go back in to the light palette, and I'm going to start off with the shade Smoke, and I'm just going to put this on the lower lash line on each side. So basically just mimicking what I did on the upper lash line. I just switched brushes because I need something a little bit more precise. So next I'm going to jump into the shade Crease, and I'm just going to use one of the brushes I used before, and I want to just buff this out a little bit. Just all the way across, smoking it. And then I want to jump into Inner Corner. I'm going to use a brush wet. This is a Refer 23, and apply it right in the center. So I just want to put this right in the center. I'm basically just mimicking what I did on the upper lash line. Still gonna have fallout, but again, I think that's just kind of the nature of these shades. And then I'm just gonna blend around it. And I'm gonna pull this out here. So I'm gonna be doing the same thing on this side, jumping into the shade Smoke. And then jumping into the shade Crease here, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other eye. Just sort of blow this out a little bit, smoke it. And then I'm going to use the shade Inner Corner and put it on the center of my lower lash line. So I am using this damp as well. I'm going to go ahead and take my Nabla liner and line both waterlines. Okay, so I think the eyes are done. I want to go into the fun part and use the blush and highlight. So the cream blush is the same formula as her, I think it was like her Love Duo. So if you're familiar with that, that's what it feels like. When you touch it, you really have to kind of work in there to get the top layer off, and then you'll get the pigment. So don't go in at first with a brush or a sponge and think you're not getting any pigment. Make sure you kind of work off the top layer. So she recommends using a sponge, so I'm just going to use this Stands Out sponge. And you kind of have to press a little bit hard to get pigment off. Like I said, they're not a really dewy, wet formula. Just work a little bit on my hand. And again, let's go in. This is the light palette. So here is one layer. I'm going to go for 2. Now I'm going in for a 3rd, just to really build this up. It's a pretty shade, and it has some sort of glow to it, but what I mean by cream to powder, it's just not sticky or dewy. Even on my hand, you can see it almost just looks like a powder. So it's one of those that's not gonna be sticky or tacky, like my hair's not gonna get caught in it or anything like that. Switching over to the dark palette, I wanna go in to the dark blush. And this is definitely deeper, but I feel like anybody could wear this. So I'm going to use a different side of my sponge and just start applying. Yeah, so you can see immediately, obviously because it is more vibrant for darker skin tones, I'm probably not gonna have to do many layers. You can see they're very similar. I would say this one in the dark palette is looking a little bit more bright, more red, whereas this one's looking a little bit more of like a pinky color. Okay, so you can see that I did one layer with the dark palette. I don't need to do another one because it is quite punchy. I did 3 layers with the light. So if you want to build it up, you can go for the light, but if you do use the dark palette, just use less and do 1 layer. Now I'm interested to try the highlighters. So we're going to go back in to the light palette into this powder highlighter, which is supposed to be a new formula. So a lot loads up on the brush. It is a little bit powdery, so let's see what kind of glow we get here. This is dry, by the way. Okay, going in for the second. Oh yeah, okay. Super intense, so if you don't tap your brush off, you're gonna get like immediate, really glowy look. That's beautiful. I really like Natasha highlighters though. Like I like her Super Glow. I like her I Need a Nude highlighter. This almost looks like wet. Ooh, okay, that's beautiful. All right, so this highlighter, I don't know if it's gonna work for me, but we're jumping into the dark palette into the highlighter here. I'm gonna use a different brush. Okay, so I do feel like I can pull this off. I can see a little bit of a cast, but I can also see one here. So I feel like, I don't know, it just depends on how much you actually apply, but I feel like it's not as dark as I thought it would be. I mean, it is just like a gold shade, I feel like, similar to maybe like the ABH Amrezy, maybe just a little bit deeper. But overall, I really like the formula. She said it was a new formula, and it's very blinding. I don't feel like it's accentuating texture. You don't have to use it wet. So far, I'm liking it. All right, guys, so here's my finished makeup look using the new Natasha Denona Glam face palettes, and I want to give you my first impression. First of all, love the packaging. I think it's beautiful. I actually think she should do some other products in this packaging. Something about how thin it is and the rounded edges is just gorgeous. It will get fingerprints, but really, it's so beautiful, and just when you feel it, it just feels different than her other palettes, so I love this packaging. Starting off with the eyeshadows, I did notice a little bit of grabbing with these matte shades, specifically in the dark palette. Could be because I was using transition shades and crease shades that were too dark for my skin tone. I just wanted to demo it. So typically I would go in with a different transition shade, and then I would use these to add definition to the outer corner or stuff like that. So I don't know what that was in terms of the grabbing. I just felt like a little bit more blending was needed with the matte, specifically in this shade. These shimmers in these palettes, I don't feel like I've seen from Natasha before. These are so beautiful and just high shine. They're almost like, they're not glitters, but they give you that like really sparkly effect. Very similar to the topper shades in the Patrick Ta, but these are a totally different feel. They just give you like that gold flaky look on your eyes. But with that, they do have fallout and they are flaky. Now, I did think that the dark palette wasn't as flaky. I didn't feel that they were as dry or crumbly as the light palette. The overall effect is beautiful on the eye, but they're messy, so definitely do your eyes first. Now, in terms of the shades in the light versus the dark palette, I felt like I really wished that the smoke shade in the light palette was a smidge deeper. I still got nice depth, but I would have liked maybe like a smidge deeper. And the dark palette is definitely going to be great for those of you that have like medium tan, deep skin tones. So I get it. I can use both of them. Now, in terms of the blushes, they're very easy to use. They're not sticky. I feel like they would be great for beginners if you're someone that's afraid of creams. They don't lift. I would definitely use a sponge, and you definitely have to get the top layer off. So just know that. So if you dip in the first time and feel like you're not getting much pigment, make sure you're really kind of getting that top layer off, breaking that barrier and getting to the cream. This is a buildable formula, I would say. It's pigmented, but not crazy pigmented. It's not anything like the Rare Beauty. It's one of those where you can build it up. Now, of course, I did 3 layers of the light shade, but I did 1 layer of the dark just because it's a deeper color. But I love both colors. I'm a blush fiend. In terms of the highlighter, it is definitely a powder. A little goes a long way. I mean, look at that. I feel like it's a beautiful beaming highlight. It applied beautifully. I didn't notice, you know, glitter flying all over the place. And I don't think it enhanced my texture, to be honest. Now, this shade works for me better, of course, in the light palette. The dark palette, I can use it, and I feel like it looks okay, but I can see a little bit of a cast. So overall, I think the colors are absolutely gorgeous. They're not too cool toned, like her Glam palette is very cool toned. These are definitely cooler, but they're not as cool as her Glam. I feel like these are great, neutral, cool shades that a lot of people will love. If I had to choose, I have to say that I still am preferring the light. Now, I don't know if it's because I feel like the shade on my lid really just kind of brightens up my eye, whereas this is a lot more smoky. But overall, I think they're beautiful. I really love the color combinations. I'm glad that she didn't just come out with 1. I would have liked to maybe see 3. I think that would have been the sweet spot. Maybe like fair light, and then like medium tan, and then like deep dark. I feel like that would have been a little bit better. But I'm glad that she came out with 2 and not 1. So overall, I like them. I want to know what you guys think. Do you like the light side on me, or do you like the dark side? I would love to know your thoughts down below if you've picked this up. Again, I will link these down below wherever I can, and also all the other makeup I'm wearing on my face right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Of course, I'll keep testing them and give you my full review in a few weeks here. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.